Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation about overcoming data silos. Please note that whatever numeric examples I use in this presentation are fictional. Before jumping into the topic, let me introduce myself quickly. And with that, my name is Bita Motamedian. I'm an engineer passionate about model-based approaches. And most of my career and my experience since 2004 has been on data and system integration. Of course, data warehouse, data architecture, and data modeling had been part of the integration systems and data that I had been done in different industries and different projects. As you will see, I'm advocating using standards like ITIL, TOGAF, VMBOK, and many more in several projects. And I'm here to share my experiences on data silos, the issues, and of course, how overcoming the overarching problems of data silos based on my experiences. I hope that I can connect with more data experts like you at the end of the session and get your feedback and your idea on this topic. Before we start about my experiences, I would like to bring and start with an example. Imagine that you are the CEO or you are a top decision maker in your company. You need a specific number for one of your metric, let's call it active users last month, MAU, so to say, for your let's say overcoming planning. You ask your department leads to give you the number. So one of your department, let's call it marketing department, comes with 18,000 number. The other one, call it finance department, comes with a totally different number, 8,500. And the third one, let's call it product department, comes with another different number, 11,000. Well, who is right? You ask yourself. You ask your department leads why these numbers are so different. What is the definition of active users that you use? You might probably receive also 3 different definitions. One might say a user we called active user is based on the, for example, use of our search function in our app. Probably this definition comes from product department. Your marketing department comes with another definition. Say, no, we consider active user a user who clicked on our last month's marketing campaign email. And the finance department might say, oh, none of them. Actually, we consider an active user a user who paid last month's the monthly fee. Again, who is actually right? Probably all of them are right. Probably they all are right because they are focused on their domain based on their context. But you need one single number for your decision making. So the whole business actually needs one reliable, required, consolidated report. You got the point, right? So these department leads, they came and talked about the numbers. They were talking actually about 3 different things, but they were using the same terminology. So that is based on my experience, what I observed, the organization structures of these kinds of, data silo problems. So of course, all organizations have different departments. Each department might have one or more teams, different sizes, big, small, different data skill sets. I'm just talking about data, so to say, skill sets. Under them, the problem here would be, in this example that I brought, would be that the definition of the KPI and metrics was not consolidated, was not common and global in the company. So each department tried to do their best and define it in a way that would make sense to their context, to their department, to their domain. And of course, also calculation of that metric might have been different. As you see, for example, that one can be lower than the other, and the way that they also present it might be different. They also might have only access to specific part of data. For example, marketing department might not have access to the finance data sets and so on and so forth. so they are not consolidated. Well, now let me walk you through my experience on what I think and I believe are the main reasons, the main root causes of creation of data silos. I believe that the lack of accepting data as real asset is one of the main reasons of the data silo creation in the first place. Data is actually a bridge between business function and the technology and product. And if it would be handled or let's say supervised by one of the other departments, would it be technology under CTO or finance under CFO or product under CPO? This bridge is broken because the data then is biased, is under the strategy of that specific division. That is why I think that the second most important reason of creation of data silo is this lack of data strategy. So if data is supervised by one of the domain, it does not have its own strategy, but it is following, for example, product strategy and so on and so forth. Without having a data strategy, the creation of data governance and implementation of data governance then is problematic, it's not complete. And that comes also to another topic of ownership, right? Each domain might own the topic, might own the data that they have and they use, but it does not mean that the ownership of data quality is in place. So in my example, we also saw that one of the main reason of these silos being created was also because they didn't have access to a single source of truth, because there was no business dictionary available, because there was no business glossary, or there was no common enterprise-wide definition available. Therefore, they tried to define it on their own domain. So the lack of, I say, enterprise-wide definition and single source of truth for those important topics that we call it KPI or metrics for business continuity is another main reason of data silo creation in first place. And again, in my example, disparate systems and lack of understanding of the dependencies between systems, between application, between teams can cause the silos going into their own domain and trying their best, of course, but it is not bringing the value the company and the organization as whole is looking for. The consequences of data silo, of course, is clear to all of us. It's poor data quality, redundant data, inconsistent, incomplete data, but also the increase of cost of from different perspective actually. So the cost can be the cost of many data people you might need in each of the departments, in each of teams, but also if it would be a very flexible setup, you would probably have many different technologies, many different infrastructure which might be used and adapted in each team that needs also maintenance. This also can increase the dissatisfaction of employees, because if they cannot access to the complete data, whatever they do might not be satisfying for the business, let's say, leaders, and therefore they don't have this fulfillment which causes the dissatisfaction. Let me share now what I believe, based on my experiences, that could be some approaches to overcome this overcoming problems of data silos. How I tackled it actually in my experiences. I focused on three parallel approaches. Let me call them data strategy, data infrastructure and ecosystem, and alignment, communication, and leadership. What is on the data strategy part? Defining a proper data strategy is the first step from my perspective to a successful implementation of data governance in any company. So introducing a more defensive strategy. What I mean of defensive strategy, meaning adding a bit more control on the data and ensuring the integrity of data flowing through your internal and external systems. Those improve the quality of data, and those can bring a bit limitation from the access to data, of course, but then you are more adaptive to the regulations and also controlling the quality of your data. Also introducing a proper roadmap and objective key results in order to bring the data governance implementation to life is very important. But more important than having proper data strategy and roadmap and let's say object key results in place is communicating it. Communicating it regularly and clearly. What are the steps, why we are doing so, how we are doing so, what are the, let's say, updates we have, what are the progress we are doing in order to gain the trust and the support from the business from one side and your team from the other side in order to continue implementing the 10 pillars of data governance, which are usually long-term projects. What I also consider under the data strategy part is promoting a data culture, of course, based on data and business standards, frameworks, and methodologies. What I have used, and actually it proved successful so far, was, for example, CRISP-DM. CRISP-DM had helped me a lot in reducing the gap between the business and tech people in order to bring more awareness. What we have as data, understanding data, what are the limits there to business people, and on the other hand, clarifying the business needs to the tech people, so connecting them and reducing the gap of this separation. What is also very important in all projects, and also the other great speakers in the previously also discussed, is requirement gathering, requirement management. In the past 5 years, I focused only on using TOGAF requirement management framework, which helped me a lot. And during the requirement gathering and requirement management, I also usually create dependency checklists in order to ensure all the systems that are dependent on the project, on the topic, are not overlooked or unconsciously forgotten. But what is important after doing all of this is running data discovery sessions in order to ensure that all the requirements that are gathered are actually complete. All the business needs that are vital for the project are correctly understood. And what I mean of data discovery sessions, meaning that what data we have at all, where our data live, and who has access to it. Is this data updated? If it is not updated, when was the last time it was updated? How this data is being generated, all of these questions in order to complete the requirements. How I did this data discovery was running different workshops with individual experts internally in the company and also within the team and the departments, different departments, to be able to gather their feedback and also to ensure that everything is heard, is collected properly. What is important in this process is documenting it. How I used, a documentation approach. What was it? I usually use Beam of Lawrence Coors and also BPMN, which helped me a lot in order to clarify the steps of each process and also clarifying to non-technical business stakeholders why we are doing so before jumping into data modeling. Of course, the data modeling, I'm like most of you here, a big fan of data vault modeling. And for the, let's say, the end of funnel, for the reporting, I usually use dimensional modeling star schema. But what also I think that had helped me was advocating what is data model in the company, that a data model is not to design a database, but it is there to understand business and its requirements fully and correctly, and make us actually possible for designing a scalable solution for the future. Now let's talk about the second part of my approach, which is on data ecosystem or data infrastructure. So imagine that you have the best strategy, the best roadmap in place, but if you don't have the baseline to implement it, it might not be of value. So it is very important to ensure that we have the reliable infrastructure in place, and that would support the implementation of the pillars of the data governance. So what does that mean? So looking into existing pipelines and what actually needs to be implemented. Let's talk about one example. If your business needs real-time data, do you have already that infrastructure in place? Do you have a pipeline to support it? Are you really collecting all changes, or are you capturing all changes of data that your business needs? So implementing those proper data pipeline is very important, but also ensuring that you customize what is needed in the data warehouse design, or you design a custom data warehouse with the layers that the business need, actually, based on the requirements, based on the need that you have collected already. So based on my experience, what was very important was in this process, ensuring that you slowly go through eliminating the, let's say, local databases that were existing in the separate teams, to ensure that the redundant data or the incomplete, inconsistent data would not be produced again and again, and ensuring that the merge of data is happening in your data warehouse. And of course, introducing high quality data marts for the reporting part. What was very interesting for me in different industries I worked was the integration, the data integration or the system integrations were not following basic standards sometimes. What I mean of basic standards are at least following naming convention, at least putting some patterns and setting those patterns for the favor of, so to say, business continuity. And let's say ensuring that the data is being produced in a way that you can use it for insight creation. So if we look at the hype in the market that is event data, tracking data, we would like to track everything. How those event data are being generated in first place, how we are collecting them, how we are using them. If we don't have in one company, if we don't have a proper plan for that, we cannot really use the generated, so to say, data. So as we always say, garbage in, garbage out, right? So that standardizing data integration with data warehouse is also very, very important for the successful implementation of data governance and overcoming the data silo issues. And now I would like to go through the last approach that I had about alignments and communication and leadership. Of course, it is very important to set the goals that are clear, to set steps clearly, and manage the expectation. That can be short-term and long-term. So short-term usually is ensuring that the knowledge is unified in a pool that can be accessible by almost everyone, so that you can actually gain value from delivering low-hanging fruit. And that would bring some support from business, from your team, and then you can focus on continuous work on the foundational projects in the long term. What I mean of foundational projects are those that we need for data governance pillars implementation. Upskilling and coaching the members of the data team was, in all of my experiences, very important in order to also motivate the team that they can learn something new, interesting, and exciting, but also they can apply it. So knowledge sharing, preparing some, let's say, presentation, or ensuring that you can adapt some of those models, some of those approaches in daily work were very, very helpful for me. And I think as a bookworm, I call myself, running some book clubs based on some of the reliable resources helped me to help my team to come into the world of data in a more structured manner. Building trust with team and stakeholder, I quickly mentioned, is very important. Communicating transparently about the issue, about the obstacles, how we align to support the business continuity, how we align with other teams to solve, let's say, an incident, a problem, and so on and so forth, are really necessary to be transparently communicated, not only within the team, but also among all those stakeholders that are relevant to your project. But it's also important that we give regular, I say, update to the whole company to make sure that everyone understands what we are doing, why we are doing so, and what are the steps to go to also gain the trust from them. And once you gain the trust, once they support you, you have more time to invest on the foundational project rather than answering sometimes the questions that might not be really valuable questions. So I say start with a vicious cycle of making your stakeholders more data literate and gaining the benefit of improving data culture in the whole company. That has brought a lot of value, at least in my previous experiences. And I think the most challenging part during this phase of overcoming data silos for me was leading the team through the changes. Of course, working on one domain with focus on only one domain differs from, coming out one step back and looking at the business as whole and trying to understand the connections, try to understand dependencies, and, bringing more value globally. So that needed encouraging positive attitude and open-minded, being good listener, and also as a leader, I should do what I had said, what I had claimed, and I should also, let's say, be careful what I do is supporting, what I had advocating before. That also brought, at least it taught me that sometimes it's important that we stick to some disciplines. Like moving fast always needs discipline. So I know that agile approaches push us to move fast, but sometimes the agile approaches, they forget about disciplines and, putting some controls in place, and that would cost sooner or later from my perspective. Yeah, with that said, I just want to maybe conclude quickly that the main points of my presentation was that overcoming data silos are based on 3 aspects, based on my experience. Having a robust business understanding, so through data strategy or a proper, so to say, roadmap, and ensuring that you have a proper, robust, scalable infrastructure and data ecosystem in place, as well as communication, clearly communicating, transparently transferring knowledge, and alignment with stakeholders in order to build trust. So I would like just to finalize this presentation with saying that I think that we can change the perception, but we really cannot change the concept. And I really believe that the data warehouse provides data integrity and stability to the whole organization. So as Bill Inman says, data warehouse is RIP, resilient information processing. Thank you for your attention.